For Oasis Audio, I'm Wayne Shepherd, and my guest for the next several minutes is the author of No Safe Harbor, Elizabeth Ludwig. Elizabeth is an award-winning author with several books to her credit, but she's also an accomplished speaker and teacher and often lectures on editing for fiction writers and other related topics. She has a popular literary blog, The Borrowed Book, and she lives in Texas. And Elizabeth, I get the sense that you are as proud of that last fact as you are anything else.
Well, pretty much anyone who hails from Texas is proud of that fact.
Are you a native Texan?
No, I'm not actually, but I got here as fast as I could. My husband and I were from Michigan originally. Both of us, we grew up in a couple of small towns just about 6 miles apart from each other. 1996, he accepted a transfer to Texas. I had family that lived in the Rio Grande Valley area and in the Houston, Texas area. So when the plant that he worked for offered a transfer, it seemed like Texas was the natural choice because I already had family here.
Okay, I knew I liked you because I was born and raised in Michigan, so that's got to be the reason why right there.
Right.
But I also left many, many years ago. Well, I want to talk to you about writing fiction, but tell me about this book, The Writing of No Safe Harbor.
Oh, I was so excited when I got the phone call from my agent telling me that there was interest in an idea that we had on a series of books about an Irish immigrant who comes to America in search of a long-lost brother. I wanted to do something a little different than a straight historical romance. Although I like historical romance, and that is one of my favorite genres, I grew up reading Nancy Drew mysteries and the Hardy Boys, and I was a big fan of Phyllis A. Whitney. Some readers will remember she wrote some of those Gothic romances, and they always had a little bit of an element of danger to them, an element of suspense, or a little bit of kind of edge-of-your-seat type of mystery to them, and that was what we wanted to put together. And so when I got the idea for the Edge of Freedom series, it was with that angle in mind. We wanted to put something together that combined historical romance with an element of suspense.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds to me like this isn't just a job. This is something you really enjoy doing.
Oh, I love, well, actually, it started out as a love of reading. When I was a little kid, I was a really good kid. I never got in trouble. I always did my homework.
I'm glad you brought that up because we have some folks on the line who can verify that fact. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, no. But the one thing that I did do and that I always used to get in trouble for was I would sit up till 2 or 3 in the morning on a school night reading, and my mom would catch me with a tiny little nightlight, the covers thrown over my head, reading a book. And from as early on as I can remember, that was the one thing that I loved to do. And it translated into a love of writing. I can still remember vividly sitting in church one day and daydreaming a story in my head. And when the time came for the invitation and I realized that I had not heard a single word of the message, I was so overcome with guilt. And I went to the altar and I asked the Lord what I should do with the stories that I had rolling around in my head. And his answer was really clear. He said, write them down. And from that point forward, I get a nice story idea, and I immediately write it down, and the stories just seem to flow.
But you, as anyone who's tried it knows, know well how hard it is to get started. So, and I noticed that your first novel, Where the Truth Lies, was co-authored with Janelle Mowry. How did this all start then professionally for you?
I started writing in about 2001, and unfortunately, I started submitting at the same time. And I say unfortunately because it took me several years to learn the difference between writing fiction and writing fiction well. I was an English major in college, and I had a minor in journalism, and I thought I knew everything there was to know about writing. Unfortunately, writing fiction is very different from the papers that I was doing in college, and even the books that I was reading in college. Fiction, it changes. Writing fiction is different from year to year, and the rules are flexible. The rules even change, and so I've realized that I really have to keep current with the kinds of books that are being put out there. I have to not only read, but it reflects on my writing. The things that I read reflects onto my writing. It's
interesting you mentioned your reading habit as a child, because obviously that's where it starts for many people, isn't it? Is with that love of reading first, which leads into something along the lines of being an author eventually.
my sister it used to drive her crazy that I would, rather than want to go outside and play, I would rather sit inside and read books. And so she would hide my books from me, trying to get me to coax me outside with her. Well, when I sold my first book, you couldn't believe I went back to her and say, yeah, what are you going to say now?
Yeah. Well, to do that to your sister, I mean, that's sweet revenge right there, isn't it?
Right. Getting started writing, I joined a critique group. That was one of the best decisions that I made. I found a group online called, at the time they were called the American Christian Romance Writers. Recently, a few years ago, changed their name to the American Christian Fiction Writers. Mm-hmm. That was how I got started, was by joining a group of online writers. It's not just writers, it's editors, publishers, agents, who were willing to share their experience and their expertise in the field of fiction. And I went from that stage of writing and submitting before I was really ready to taking a couple of years off. When I joined the American Christian Fiction Writers, and my critique group in particular, Janelle Mowry was one of my critique partners. When I learned how much I didn't know about writing fiction, I took a break of almost 2 years where I did nothing but try to learn the craft of writing fiction well. And in that time, Janelle she was in my critique group. She was also writing historical romance. And so we got very familiar with each other's work. So when we got the idea for co-authoring a cozy mystery, by that point, we knew each other's work very well. We were familiar with each other's writing style, and we were close enough friends that we could be brutally honest with each other.
Yeah, that's important. Wasn't it hard, though, to submit yourself to the critique? I mean, I can imagine that's kind of humbling, isn't it?
It's very humbling. You know, when you pour so much of yourself into something, to have it come back less than perfect and to realize that it's less than perfect, that hurts. But it's also something that I knew and I had come to understand that if I was not willing to subject myself to that pruning process of getting rid of the unnecessary and the stuff that just cluttered up my writing, if I wasn't willing to submit to that, then I wasn't going to get anywhere with seeking publication. Mm-hmm. And yes, it hurts, and it's a painful process, but over time, you kind of learn to accept it. You kind of learn that it's just part of the process.
Like many things in life, there's no shortcuts.
That's right.
And it's hard work, and you have to submit yourself to it, and there's a discipline involved, and I get the sense that maybe as you coach writers now, those are some of the lessons you teach.
Absolutely. And I always share, as painful as it is to pull out those rejection letters and to pull out some of those early critiques, I always share those with people because I want them to see, that it's when I do a critique for someone or when someone comes to me and asks me for input, I want them to see that, what I'm trying to impart to them is some of what I've learned along the way. And I want them to be able to look back on where I came from and where I am now and see the progression, because it can be discouraging. There is a lot of rejection involved in the publishing business. And if we don't see the growth, if we don't see the progression from something that was really raw and really bad to something that you can improve and polish, and, we have to see that improvement, that progression. And hopefully when I share some of the rejection letters, we laugh over it. We kind of giggle over some of the things that the editors very creatively said, thanks, but no thanks. But, it's encouraging, I think, for others to see that, I got rejection letters and I felt that sting, but it's perseverance. There's no secret to publishing other than pushing past the rejection and persevering.
Yeah, and I think there's a lesson here for all of us, whether we're writers or not: persistence, learning the craft, applying ourselves. What are you still learning? I know you teach a lot, but how do you put yourself into a place of learning today?
Well, I think if I ever get to the point where I feel like I've arrived, that I need to quit writing.
Yeah.
Because there's no perfect novel. I can always, at every book I've ever written, including the ones that have been published, I look back at them and think, that could have been so much stronger. I could have done this or I could have done that. I'm always learning about a characterization, about giving motives to even the smallest characters, the secondary characters that really bring your story to life. I'm always learning about what it means to layer in subplots and subtext and what it means to give deeper motivations, deeper meanings to each of the characters and each of the plot lines that I'm trying to weave in.
I'm not a writer, but I can identify with the idea that when you finish something, you look back and say, now what could I do better next time?
Exactly.
How does your teaching take place? I mean, is this a formal thing that you do? Do you coach young writers or writers of any age, I guess?
Yeah, it's kind of a mixture. I've done several things online. I taught at a local college here. They have a continuing education class.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have taught a continuing education class online for one of the local colleges on writing cozy mysteries. I usually will teach at workshops, or I've done all-day seminars. I've done several short workshops, hour-long workshops at some of the local conferences in Houston and Lake Charles. I try to mix it up. I've also belonged to several online critique groups that are pretty big. One of the critique groups that I belong to has something like 25 members. I will pick and choose. Obviously, I can't critique for 25 people who are all submitting chapters weekly.
Mm-hmm.
But what I can do is I'll try and pick one or two a week, and then I will send it back to the group. And hopefully, I learned a lot, not just when my chapter was critiqued, but I learned from reading other people's chapters and what other people had to offer for a critique.
That's great. Iron sharpens iron.
Exactly. And so I hope that by doing that, anyone can learn from the critique that I gave to one person.
Hey, tell me about your blog, The Borrowed Book. Where does the title come from, by the way?
Well, some friends of mine, Sandra Robbins and Sandra Moore, we were talking about blogging and how hard it is on top of everything else that, as authors, that we have to do, deadlines and marketing and promotion, the things to add blogging on top of that, the things and the work that it takes to maintain an active blog. Well, we decided that rather than try to do that individually, we would pool our efforts and try and come up with something collectively. While we were discussing that, one of the things that we talked about was the idea of the words that we pen coming from God, not from ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so really our words are just borrowed from God. And so the name of the blog is a reflection on what we feel God has given to us or entrusted to us to put out there for others.
And we can find that easily by Googling The Borrowed Book. Is there of course, you have a website as well, which is?
ElizabethLudwig.com.
All right, very simply put, and you can find all the other titles that you've done there. We're just focusing today on No Safe Harbor because this is the audio edition of the book. It's published by Baker in print and Oasis Audio. Hey, I know you live in Texas. I know you have a family. What does Elizabeth Ludwig do for fun? What does your family like to do?
Oh, I am an avid football fan. And
no
come
way.
September...
Friday Night Lights, huh?
That's right. And come September, you see, I'm in front of the TV. I have the NFL channel, the NFL network, and do I tell you what team I root for?
Oh, go ahead.
Go Pittsburgh!
Pittsburgh. Where did that come from? I thought maybe Detroit Lions or something.
Okay, no one's really a Detroit Lions fan.
Oh, come on! They're getting better.
They are getting better. Yes, they are. But I have been a Steelers fan since the 70s.
Okay.
And then we also, moving to Texas, as difficult as it was to move away from family, because both my husband and my family are still in Michigan, as difficult as that was, it really did make my son and my daughter and my husband and I grow closer.
Mm-hmm.
We love to ski. We love to go to Colorado over spring break. That's an annual thing that we do together. Now, both of my children have married, and fortunately, both of them married have spouses who are pretty athletic, so they go skiing with us. And we love to do things as a family.
Good. No grandchildren yet?
No grandchildren yet, and I've told my husband while I'm ready for that phase of life, I don't know how I feel about being called grandma.
I know. I'm with you. I understand that. You mentioned your husband. Introduce him to us.
Oh, I am married to the most wonderful romantic man in all the world, and I promised him I would say that. He really is a sweetheart. You would think that, between the two of us, with me being a female and a romance writer, that I would be the romantic one, but really it's him. He texts me daily sweet messages just to tell me that he's thinking about me or that he loves me, and he's a very sweet man. But to look at him now, you wouldn't know that. He's a big, strong German guy. He rides a Harley Davidson, and he likes to dress the part. So
okay. All right. Okay.
So
nothing wrong with that.
So if you were to walk up to him and tell him, "I hear you're a romantic," that might not go over so well.
But he's a big softy, huh?
That's right.
You didn't tell me his name.
I'm sorry. My husband's name is Lee.
All right. Well, we enjoy your book so much. It's so much fun to get to know the person who's put these together, who's borrowed these from God, and put them out there for all of us. Anything else we need to know about this book or about you that you think listeners would be interested in?
Well, the one thing I'd like to share, someone asked me recently what the theme of No Safe Harbor was, and really the same theme runs throughout all three of the books, and I quoted a line from the book, and I'd like to do that now. Tara looked at her brother Owen, a sad smile on her face. "Owen, my dear braw lad, it's the church you have been following all of these years, not the Savior."
Wow. That's the theme.
That's the theme.
That's a great one. Elizabeth, thank you so much. It's been delightful talking with you, and I know listeners will even more eagerly listen and read your book now, and the others in the series as well. Elizabeth Ludwig, the author of No Safe Harbor, now available from Oasis Audio. Elizabeth, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
For Oasis Audio, I'm Wayne Shepherd.